Welcome back to the Emotional Abuse Recovery Podcast. Today, I wanted to address shame and guilt and really distinguish the differences between the two because I had someone reach out to me on Facebook who was really struggling, and I thought this would be helpful to everyone else who is listening. So, I'm here to support you, and I understand that what you're going through, if you are struggling with feelings of shame, that it's incredibly challenging to process this. And it's important for you to acknowledge that these feelings are real, that they can get stuck inside of you if you don't let them move through, right? Emotions are just feelings that are energy inside of your body. And shame and guilt are these two just awful, dark cloud kind of emotions that a lot of times survivors of emotional abuse carry around for years and years and years to come. So they have two very distinct qualities and they each impact our well being in different ways. So I want to address that. And if you are struggling with this, or if you know someone else who might be, share this episode with them and we'll get started.
Welcome to the Emotional Abuse Recovery Podcast, a podcast specifically designed to help you heal after a toxic or narcissistic relationship. This podcast teaches you to use your subconscious mind to go from feeling stuck to set free. In here, you will learn how to use the power of your own mind to free yourself from emotional pain, move forward with confidence, and experience the inner peace you deserve in your healing journey after emotional abuse. I'm your host and subconscious reprogramming coach, Allison Dagny. So let's get started.
Okay, so let's really just first dive into the different definitions of shame and guilt. So if we start out with guilt, guilt is this feeling that comes up inside of us if we believe that we've done something wrong or harmful to other people, or that like we are to blame. And it's usually tied to action or behavior, or like if we choose to do something or have chosen to do something in the past. And guilt serves a purpose, right? It does serve as a moral compass for us. Like it helps us to make amends and apologies in relationships. It helps us take responsibility for our actions. So guilt does serve a purpose, but it's when we hold guilt that it can actually cause us more harm than good. And if you would just think of guilt as a signal, right? And just it's an emotion, just like any emotion. Just think of it as a signal that we care about ourselves and we care about others. And it can actually help us lead a more fulfilling life. It can actually help us in a lot of different ways. But distinguishing this from shame is going to be really important, and also not carrying these things, right? We can experience emotions, but we have to release them. We have to let them go at some point, right? A lot of people don't want to let go because of what they make it mean, and we will get into that in just a little bit. So let's talk about shame. Shame is a very painful emotion. It is a very deep and awful feeling that goes beyond just feeling bad about your actions, right? Shame is like, I am bad, right? It's like owning that, as far as not that I did something wrong and kind of compartmentalizing that separately. Shame is actually saying that I am bad. It's this just kind of fundamental belief that you are flawed in some way, or that you are unworthy or undeserving of love or acceptance or kindness or any of those things. So shame will often come up from a sense of like not meeting other people's expectations, or maybe your own expectations. So it's this intense sort of like isolating emotion that can often lead to self-blame, self-criticism, and a distorted self-image of who you truly are. So for survivors, it's very common to experience both guilt and shame, even when these things weren't necessarily your fault or your responsibility. Some may be, some may not. But these emotions can come from a lot of different places, depending on what your personal circumstances are and your individual situation and the trauma that you've experienced. But guilt often comes from a feeling of responsibility for not being able to prevent the abuse or control it, right? But it's really important to remember that the responsibility when someone abuse you is always on the abuser, not the victim, not the survivor. So the thing where shame comes in is that it can actually be a result of the abuse tactics, right? To kind of reinforce this control and manipulation, making the survivor feel as though somehow they're at fault by the abuse that occurred, which is absolutely not true. So the reason I want to talk about this is because it can really help with healing if you can address shame and guilt as part of your process, as part of your journey, and especially if it's coming up for you in different aspects of your life, if you notice, and I'll talk about how this might present. But it's really important to work through these emotions, right? In a very supportive, healing environment, right? Doing the things for yourself, right? It's hard to heal yourself when you're in a toxic environment. So if you're still in the abusive relationship, if you're still with the abuser, it's going to be more challenging. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's way more impactful and productive if you can do this in a supportive and in a healing type of environment to help you move yourself forward. So your emotions are valid. Shame, guilt, those kinds of emotions are real, right? So acknowledging those emotions instead of judging them, instead of allowing them to become something that's like a dark shadow over top of you, just acknowledge that it's there. And once we can acknowledge it, once we can embrace it, then we become way more familiar with it. And then when we become familiar with it, it's almost like it isn't controlling us, but it's actually part of us. And then when something is part of us and we acknowledge that, then we can take action in order to let it go. So if you are in therapy with like a counselor or a psychologist or somebody like that, this can also be really helpful for processing shame and guilt. Or if you're working with a coach, somebody like me, being part of support groups, Facebook groups, divorce groups, things like that also can be really helpful and beneficial. You just have to be really careful about the company that you're in and really take careful consideration if these are actually helpful or harmful. Because I know, and I've dealt with lots and lots of women who've been struggling who also go to therapists, and I've had people sort of double down on that shame or, say things that really aren't helpful. So if it doesn't feel right to you when you're working with someone or you're, talking to somebody and they're making it feel worse than better, sometimes people say, oh, it's tough love and you just got to see the truth and you just got to know what this is and move on or whatever, right? Like if that doesn't feel good to you, then use your compass inside of you, use that instinct and make sure that you are not perpetuating that shame, perpetuating that guilt based on what other people's opinions are, okay? Because healing involves recognizing that the abuse was not your fault. And though there may be parts of the experience that you do take responsibility for or you want to acknowledge, that's fine and that's wonderful. But, finding ways to rebuild your sense of self-worth and your self-love is all going to be key. And that's not going to happen if you're surrounding yourself with people who don't understand you, who don't understand your circumstances, or like narcissism or hidden abuse, things like that. That's not going to be super helpful because these people, they're not intending to be that way. They just have their own filters. They have their own programs. They have their own way of seeing the world. And so if you're operating in a way that kind of misaligns with what they think, then of course that's how they're going to respond to you. And it may perpetuate feelings of shame and guilt, which then will potentially slow down or halt your healing progress. So you deserve understanding, you deserve compassion, you deserve healing in a supportive environment. So I'm going to be that person for you today, and I'm going to give you some specific things that you can work through in order to help you along. So if you have a pen and paper, grab it so you can take notes. Okay, so the number one thing to do when you are experiencing feelings of guilt and shame is, number one, to be aware of it. Mindfulness and awareness of what's going on in your thoughts, this idea of metacognition, thinking about your thoughts. I did a podcast on metacognition, so you could go back and listen to that. But it's thinking about your thinking, basically. Most people don't do this day to day. The thoughts just kind of run through their head. And, we have about 60 to 70,000 thoughts every single day. And the majority of those are the same thoughts as yesterday. So being in touch with your thoughts can really help you to process your emotions in a really healthy way. So that is absolutely number one. So what I always tell my clients, and this is something that you can easily do today, you're not working with me one-on-one, you're not in my self-worth program learning, you're just listening to the podcast, and that's wonderful. But what you can do today to practice this is set an intention for today that you are going to pay attention to your thoughts. So throughout the entire day, whenever an emotion comes up, look at that as your signal. That is your signal to pay attention, because the emotions are not just coming from nowhere, right? They're not just coming from out of the blue. Those emotions are coming from your subconscious beliefs. And your subconscious beliefs are not like way down deep at the, some deep dark tunnel or deep dark hole. No, they're literally right there on the surface. If you've ever vented to a friend about something that you were struggling with, you'll hear all kinds of subconscious beliefs in that. Like if you could rewind and replay a conversation that you had with someone, those are your subconscious beliefs. Subconscious oftentimes has this sort of connotation of being really like deep and below the surface, but it's really not. So use this intention. Decide, I am going to be aware of my thoughts today. Anytime an emotion comes up, and then just start paying attention. Don't judge them. Don't, worry if they're right or wrong or any of that. Just pay attention. So even if you're just driving down the road and somebody pulls out in front of you and you get angry or you get frustrated or you're annoyed, right? What am I thinking about? What specifically am I thinking about? They shouldn't do that. People should be better drivers. People should, be courteous. They should pay attention, right? These are just thoughts. These are just subconscious beliefs. It doesn't mean they're necessarily true, right? If it's not true for 100% of people, 100% of the time, it's just a belief, okay? So that's number one. The other thing is to number two, validate your emotions. Okay, so you're aware of them. You're aware of your emotions first. You're aware of your thinking. You started the process. You have this intention, but validate it, right? Give it space. Okay, I'm feeling angry. Okay, I'm just experiencing what that feels like in my body. Or I'm feeling sad. Like, just sit with it for a minute. If we don't acknowledge these emotions, then a lot of times they get stuck inside of us. This is where you'll find people who have a lot of health problems, people who have physical ailments, people who are high anxiety or high stress. This is what happens when we don't process our emotions. They get stuck in our body. When I was going through my trauma-informed training, what they said about emotions is that emotions are energy in motion. So that emotion, energy in motion. And it's so true, right? So emotions are just this feeling. It's energy surging through us. So we need it to be in motion and we need it to flow through our bodies. But if we are not acknowledging those emotions, we're not validating them, and instead we're judging them and we're stuffing them and we're compartmentalizing these things and not acknowledging it, then those emotions can get stuck. So these are two very important things. Just being aware, having that mindfulness, thinking about your thinking, and then validating how you feel, right? A lot of times we think it's bad to be angry, or we think it's wrong to be sad, or that we should be over it by now. No, You can validate yourself. It's okay to have these emotions. Okay, so I want to talk about some common beliefs, right? Because that's the arena that I'm in, is all about our beliefs. And I said before, you don't have to dig up your beliefs, right? They're usually there on the surface. If you have ever vented to someone, if you've ever journaled any of your emotions, they're right there. There are people, I hear it all the time. Like when people are talking about anything or posting things on social media, I can see their beliefs. I'm trained, obviously, to be able to uncover people's subconscious beliefs because people speak in different ways, they think in different ways. But because I have the training, I am really good at figuring out what those beliefs are, even if you aren't. So, but I can give you some, and I have on other podcasts, some tips and tools and tricks on how to do this, like, and how to identify your subconscious beliefs. Some people's beliefs really are very straightforward, like shoulds, I can't, I need to, I won't, like these kind of affirmative type of statements, and then the judgment ones, like I can't, or not, I should or I shouldn't, like those kinds. So if you hear yourself speaking in those terms, then those are beliefs. And then the other ones are like sometimes people will speak in questions and they'll say, well, why did this happen? Or maybe I did something wrong. You know, those are also subconscious beliefs. It's not just a question, it's actually a belief in disguise. So if you said, like, well, maybe I did something wrong, the belief is I did something wrong. So a lot of times people who speak in the form of questions like this are actually just speaking their beliefs right out in the open. So here are some common beliefs that abuse survivors often think. When it comes to shame and guilt, it was my fault or it was all my fault, okay? And this happens because as survivors, you tend to blame yourself for the abuse in a lot of cases, not always, but especially if you're struggling with these kinds of emotions. But the fact of the matter is the responsibility lies with the abuser. But here's the thing, your subconscious mind is running 95% of the show. So if the subconscious mind has been trained over the years to believe that it was all my fault and everything's my fault and I can't do anything right and like all this stuff, then of course you're going to feel that way. So even if I say, no, the abuser is at fault and the responsibility is with the person who hurt you, that's not going to register because that's the conscious brain, right? That's only 5%. That's like willpower thinking. So the purpose here is to figure out what the subconscious is driving, which are thoughts like, it's all my fault. And that's where we have to work, right? We got to work in the subconscious realm because that's where the power is. That's the 95%. I mean, this isn't made up. This is science. Like, we are driving our behavior based on our subconscious mind. So let's work within that realm because that's where all the power is. That's how we change. That's how I change myself. That's how my clients change. Another belief is like, I deserved it. So this is a very flawed belief that survivors somehow deserve the mistreatment they endured, like that they did something wrong or that they are inherently wrong and that they must have deserved it, right? Because why else would someone treat them like that unless they deserved it? But this is, again, this is flawed thinking that is based on programming from maybe early childhood all the way into adulthood, into that brainwashing of the abusive relationship. So if you are holding beliefs like I somehow deserved it, or, you know, I wasn't good enough to be treated well, or something like that, then that, of course, is going to elicit these emotions like shame or guilt. And then another one might be like, I am broken, or I am damaged, or I will never be okay, or things like that, right? So this emotion of feeling like you are not repairable, or that you will always be broken in some sort of way, when the reality is healing and growth are definitely possible. So these kinds of beliefs, if you go into like your next relationship feeling like I'm broken or I'm damaged or no one will want me or I'll never be able to be in a healthy relationship, right? That is because of your subconscious mind. All of these things are kind of, just churning in the subconscious, and then you feel shame for being this way. But the reality is, you are not broken. You are not damaged beyond repair. You are totally able to heal, totally able to grow. But I can tell you that till I'm blue in the face, and it's not going to change anything inside of you. What changes inside of you is when you take the stuff in your subconscious mind and you start to reframe it, you start to consider other possibilities, you start to show your mind specific examples of how that's probably not even true, or maybe it's not possible that it's the truth, that there's other possibilities that you haven't considered. So that's where the change happens, because like I said, all the other stuff is just that 5% in the conscious part of your mind. And if we're dividing our mind up into these two parts and you've got 95 versus 5, you know which one's going to win every time. So if the stuff in the subconscious is saying I'm damaged and I'm broken and I deserved it and it was all my fault, like if these are the beliefs that you're holding in your subconscious, clearly you can see how you would behave. Your beliefs drive your emotions, the emotions drive the behaviors. I say this all the time. So if you know that these are the programs that's running your show, then it's time to get those thoughts out, time to get them on paper, time to start questioning them, time to start reframing them, time to start validating the other possibilities, right? Is it possible that I'm not broken or damaged beyond repair? Are there other people out there who have experienced a lot of very similar things as me who are not broken beyond repair? Well, I'm raising my hand right now. I know you can't see me, but I've got my hand up. I experienced 20 years of emotional narcissistic abuse. And I too thought this at one point. But I don't think it anymore because I reprogrammed my mind. And so now I feel very confident and I feel extremely joyful and I feel really excited about my future. And I just love being alive. I love life. I love living it. I love the beauty in this world. And I didn't always feel like that. This changed for me once I changed my subconscious. It's just like a computer. If you take a computer out of the box and it's already been programmed with certain, things to do and, how it's going to operate, that's what it is. But if you take that computer to a technician and you say, hey, I don't really like the way my computer is operating. Can you get into it and change it for me and have it do this, this, and this? They'll say, yeah, absolutely. We can do that for you. They go in there, they write all kinds of code. They, put all the things in there that you want, right? And I was just talking to a client about this the other day. If you take your computer to a technician like that, they're not going to turn it around in the press of a button. They're not going to take your computer out, plug it in, press the shift, control, delete, or whatever, and then all of a sudden it's going to be reprogrammed. No, they're going to take a lot of time getting in there, writing out the code. It's going to take probably several days to a week, maybe even more, depending on the things that you want your computer to do. And this is exactly how your brain works too. So for those people who think, oh, I'll just reframe my thought today and then it'll be fine, that's not how this works. It is a repetitive process. It's practicing and it's brain training. This is why I offer 6 and 12-week programs for my clients, because it's not a one-time thing. I can't just teach you about the brain and the subconscious mind in one session in 1 hour and rewire your brain. Yes, it is rapid reprogramming, but it happens over time with practice. So you'll meet with me, but then in between is where you got to practice. It's like going to the gym. Right? You go to the gym, but maybe on Saturdays you meet with your trainer. Well, if you only go to the gym on Saturdays and meet with your trainer and you never work out in between, you are not going to see results. And it's the same with your brain. You have to train it. All right, so if you haven't been taking notes so far, then I'd really encourage you to now, because I have some questions that will help you to start to uncover some of the inner subconscious beliefs that you may have. So not only will you write these questions down, but you really want to get relaxed and to take the time to answer these questions. Now, I will say it is extremely important to be relaxed and not in a heightened state of emotion when you do this. Typically, when I do these kinds of exercises, I will put my AirPods in and I will put on some meditation music or theta brainwave sounds. If you prefer nature sounds or like ocean or rain or whatever, like that's fine. Just something that can help you get relaxed. I specifically prefer theta brainwave sounds because that really helps you tap into your subconscious. And if you're like, well, what are theta brainwave sounds? Well, those are like different musical, what do you call it? Patterns that help you get your brain waves to start to shift and change. And so a lot of times people will do this like before bed or something like that. And you can just Google it online, or you can, well, I wouldn't actually Google it. I'd probably just go on YouTube and then just type it in. And there's free ones out there. So you can just pop them in your earbuds and listen to that while you're doing this kind of thing. If music isn't your thing, that's fine too. Just make sure that it's quiet and peaceful and there's not a lot of distractions. So number one is, how has the abuse that you experienced affected your personal perception of who you are and your worth? Okay? So when you're answering this question, think about the things that you believe about yourself. Like, what do you believe about yourself? Because the abuse that you experienced throughout your life, in your childhood or in adulthood, did shape somehow your perception of who you are and your worth and well-being. So write out that question and then answer that to yourself. Like, you might even want to just do one per day, just so that you can really get deep into this question. Another one is, what are some ways that your abuser manipulated your feelings of guilt and shame? And so when you're asking yourself this question, this isn't about, like putting the focus on the abuser, but more about how this actually manipulated your feelings, right? Because what we're doing here is we're distinguishing between what the person did and reality, right? Because a lot of times we make this one thing. They abused me, they manipulated me, they did this to me, and that means I am bad. That means I am unworthy. That means I am undeserving, right? So distinguishing that, what the abuser did and how they actually started to develop these feelings of guilt and shame inside of you. And then what that does is, when you go back and you read it and you look through it, then you can actually take sort of a bird's eye view of it and be like, wow, like this stuff actually isn't even true. It didn't even come from me. And can be really, really eye-opening to look at it in these terms. Another question you could ask yourself, which I love, is, how do you define your true self, right? How do you define who you are? Like, what is it about you that you know for a fact? Like, I know that I'm a kind person. I know that I have a lot of empathy. I know that I am very giving. I know that I am intelligent. I know that I am smart. Whatever those things are. Put those things on paper, right? How do you define your true self, right? And really try to focus on the good here and separate it from the experiences that you've been through, right? Because the experiences actually don't determine who you are. So if you're holding feelings of guilt and shame because of the experiences that you've been through, this is where we kind of draw a line in the sand and say, well, wait a minute, who really am I? Like, these are the things that I am, right? The experiences don't define me. So this can be helpful too. Another question that you could ask yourself is, what would it take for you to believe that you deserve healing and happiness, right? Now, this can be really powerful because as you start to write this, you might be writing things like, in order for me to deserve healing and happiness, I would need people to treat me right. That would be like the very first thing. I hear this all the time. there may be other things, right? And I would encourage you to explore this question very deeply, because you deserve healing and happiness no matter what. Anybody does outside of you, okay? But when you start writing the things down, then you go back and look and you're like, oh, wait a second, right? Well, if I am going to need other people to act in a certain type of way for me to feel worthy of healing and happiness, what if those people never do that? Am I destined to be miserable for the rest of my life? Am I destined to feel like I'm not going to be able to heal? So all this does is it opens your eyes to show yourself that you don't need the things that you think you need in order to be deserving of healing and happiness. And I would really encourage you, once you make that list, to really inspect that, like, carefully. Like, is this actually true? Like, do I need people to be nice to me to feel like that I deserve healing and happiness? Or can I be nice to myself? Or is there any other things that I would need? Like, what can I get from inside myself? What can I give to me? Because really and truly, that's the only thing, right? Because we can't make other people show up how we want them to. Okay, and the last question is, can you identify moments in your life, situations in your life, when you internalized someone else's negative opinions about you? The abusers, your parents, the peanut gallery, it doesn't matter, right? Can you, when you were a child, kids making fun of you or whatever, can you identify points in your life when you said, oh, these person's opinions about me are actually my reality? Write them down. And then I want you to go back and then really inspect that. Are these things true? Absolutely true, 100% true in all cases, in all circumstances, right? No question. Or is this just a thought that I've been carrying around my whole life based on what other people have said, based on what other people have done, based on how other people have treated me? Okay? Because this is about shame and guilt. And if you're holding beliefs about who you are based on other people's opinion of you, based on how the abuser manipulated you, based on, not being able to separate your true self from these perceptions and reality, that is going to keep you feeling shameful. It's going to keep you feeling guilty when you aren't, and you don't deserve that. So these are just really important exercises that you can do, and you can do it any time. If you want me to send you these questions so that you can do them on your own, so you don't have to write everything down, like maybe you're driving right now, just send me a message on Instagram or Facebook and just say, hey, can you send me the questions from the Shame and Guilt podcast episode? And I'll just copy and paste them, put them in a message to you, and then you can print them out or just pick one and start doing it, right? Because if we don't take action, if we're not actually putting forth some effort into our healing, it's actually not going to change a whole lot. So I'd really encourage you to start getting introspective. This will help you figure out some of your subconscious beliefs about what's creating the guilt and the shame. So once you've done this and you go back and you kind of look through your notes, the things that you wrote down, see if you can find some of those subconscious beliefs. What have I written here that looks like a belief? That I'm a bad person, that no one will ever love me, that I can't make it by myself, right? Any of these things could be subconscious beliefs. If it's not true for 100% of people 100% of the time, right? So go back, circle them, highlight them, right? And really start to question them. Without question, they just keep running on the same repetitive track, which is a neural pathway in your brain. And that repetitive track and that neural pathway is what's keeping you repetitively feeling emotions like shame and guilt. All right, so I hope this has been helpful to you. Again, remember the importance of getting a supportive, healing environment, people, professionals, coaches, whoever to help you, whoever aligns with you. really just observing your thoughts and not judging them, and making sure that you are aware of the emotions, allowing those emotions to surface and feel them, because we don't want to push them down so that they get stuck in our bodies. We don't want to have, health problems that just continue to fester, get worse. The more we, really accept this mind-body connection, the more we will be able to heal. I'd really encourage you to engage with these questions that I have proposed. Start unraveling your subconscious beliefs. Start figuring out what these are, right? This isn't like an overnight thing. Remember, this isn't the press the button in the computer and all of a sudden it's reprogrammed. This takes some practice. And that's how I like to look at it. It's just practice. Every little bit you do is practice. So even just doing this, even if you're not working with me one-on-one, it's practice. So give yourself some credit for that. I am so thankful to you for being here, for listening to my podcast, for sharing it with other people in your life who, so many people are suffering. So thank you for sharing it, and thank you for listening. And as always, if there's any topics that could be helpful to you, you can send me a message. Like, I have my phone on me all the time. So just send me a DM on Instagram or Facebook. I'm happy to entertain any of your questions or any of your suggestions. I'm so happy that you are listening and that you are taking these actions and taking these steps, because it just is so good for our world. It's so good for our planet. It's not only just good for us, but we are healing, and that is healing other people. Right? Our children are seeing it, our friends are seeing it, our family, it's impacting, right? Even the things that you're doing are planting seeds in other people. So give yourself a lot of credit for that, and let's release some of these emotions. Let's release the shame, let's release the guilt, because the truth is those things don't really help us with anything. And if you are struggling with letting go of this, like let's say you even do all this stuff and you have these beliefs and you recognize them and you try to challenge them, but you're still struggling and you're still like, I can't let go of it, I still feel it so deeply. One, know that it's a lot more difficult to do this on your own than it is with somebody like me, because I'm so used to, giving you all the examples and all the different scenarios to help you shift your mindset, right? So until you get really good at doing it on your own, with a coach, then it is sometimes a little bit more challenging. I'm not saying it's not possible. It's just maybe a little bit more difficult. But if you're feeling resistance, or you are having trouble like actually releasing this stuff, even when you're listening to my podcast, then ask yourself, is there any reason why I would resist letting go of this? And for most people, there's always a positive intention. There's always a reason you don't want to let go of something that feels bad, right? If you don't want to let go of shame or of guilt, one, it's driven by your subconscious, but also you may hold on to it because it helps you with something. For me personally, something that I struggled with shame about, the reason why it was hard to let go of that for me personally, when I asked myself this question, was because if I let go of that shame, then that meant that I wasn't truly loved. So it can mean all different kinds of things for all different kinds of people. And so it's hard to let go of that shame, because what happened to me was very shameful, and letting go of that meant that it wasn't really love, that I wasn't truly loved. So I held on to the shame like, well, maybe there was something just inherently wrong with me, that I was bad or that I wasn't good enough. So I held on to that because it actually made me feel better. It actually, in some subconscious way, made me feel like that I was loved. I know that sounds warped. I know that sounds strange, but the reason I'm telling you that is because you have to figure out what your source of resistance is. It could be different for everybody. It could be, I can't let go of it because I can't face any other reason that it could have happened, right? Whatever it is going to be unique to you. So ask yourself that question, is there any reason you would resist letting this emotion go? And this takes some, really like a lot of inner work. So it's not something that you can just answer. Maybe you can answer it on the fly, but for most people, it's going to take some self-reflection. Okay, so if you're interested in working with me one-on-one in my emotional abuse recovery program, I would be happy to support you. First, I'd be happy to have a call with you, a free call, just to explain this on a deeper level and see if we are a good fit to work together, because I realize that, this might not be for everybody. So just having that conversation can sometimes give you a lot of clarity to see if this is something that you want to do. This is the only thing that ever changed me permanently. This is my go-to thing. Like anytime any emotion comes up for me, this is what I do. And I love that I can spread this to the world, and I love that I can help other people with it. And my goal is to help you so that you can change how you're feeling and be the best version of you that you can be. Be that version that you want to be. So if you want my support, you can always schedule a free call from my website at whentearsleavescars.com. You can reach out to me on Instagram or Facebook. I can send it to you there. The link to sign up for it, it's totally free. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this episode. If you have any questions, you know how to reach me. Talk to you next week.
Thank you for being here with me today in the Emotional Abuse Recovery Podcast. I hope you found value here with me. If this podcast episode was helpful to you, I'd love for you to hit subscribe and leave me a review. My goal is to help you go from feeling stuck to set free. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook, and you can check out whentearsleavescars.com for more resources and information to help you with your own emotional abuse recovery. Until next time, here's to believing in